Hello, this is Kaczmar and you're watching Geek Factor TV. Today we'll be taking a look at a game called Blood and Dust. Blood and Dust is a strategy game designed by Mateusz Albrecht that is coming to Kickstarter on June 13th. And now the link to the Kickstarter campaign is in the description below. If the link is not in there, it means that the Kickstarter hasn't started yet. So you're watching this before June 13th. But once the Kickstarter campaign launches, I will put the link in the description, so just go over there and click it and you'll be able to head on over to the campaign page. Now, this is a strategy game, like I said. It is set against the backdrop of medieval Europe, where the forces of Switzerland and Germany will battle for domination. Now, I will talk to you about how this game is constructed. This is one of two videos that I've made, two how to play videos that I've made for this game, because this game has actually three modes of play. It has the single scenario mode, it has a campaign mode, and it has a create your own scenario mode. Now in this video we'll talk about the single scenario mode, and the link to the other video is also in the description. But before I get to any of that, first let's take a look at the tokens, the unit tokens that make up your forces and that will represent your forces on the battlefield. Let's see what we can find on those tokens and the types of tokens that we have. So the first thing I want you to understand about your unit tokens is the size of them, because you have various sizes for various types of units. Now, the most popular ones are the big ones, because here you have units like infantry or cavalry or light infantry, heavy infantry, although this is heavy cavalry, sorry, heavy infantry. All those things matter when it comes to how your units perform which actions. Other types of units are, for example, those middle-sized ones. These are the machines. This is, for example, a bombard. And the smallest type of units is a hero, which is a single person. This is a specific person with a name. This is, for example, a hero called Ulrich. Now, what you can find on those tokens is a variety of information. The first thing you're going to take a look at is this frame that goes around the token. The color of the frame tells you which army this particular unit is affiliated with. A red frame means a Swiss army, and a black frame means a German army. Other type of information are obviously statistics, various statistics for performing various actions. For example, this in the arrow on the top of the token, those are so-called movement points. They will come into play when performing a move action. Right here at the bottom, here you have those small squares that you can see here. Those are the attack die, the number of dice that you will roll during attacking and defending against an opponent. Since we're talking about attacking, let's take a look at those statistics, because those tell you those two particular, sorry I'm using my pen, but if I use my finger, my fat finger will cover both of those statistics, so it will make little sense. So this, for example, right here, this is a so-called melee attack value. This is a salvo attack value. The difference between those is obviously this is like a short range attack, this is a long range attack, like close quarters, like long quarters, because and you can tell because you can see little swords here, which obviously means a melee attack. You are close, you're near each other when you perform this attack, and this shows arrows, which is obviously a long range attack. Now, whenever a unit is attacked, they have to defend themselves, right? So we have different defense statistics depending on the side from which we are attacked. Here are the defense values depending on whether we are attacked from the front, from the rear, or from either of the flanks. There are some bonus icons that talk about bonus abilities that a unit might have. This bomb-looking icon simply says that this unit has a firearms ability, which will come into play when performing an attack. This horn icon means that this unit has a charge ability, which also comes into play when performing an attack. I will talk to you about those later on during the video. This icon right here in the bottom right corner is a defense value against a salvo attack. And the final thing I want to talk to you about, and it is very important for future references, is the formation. You have different types of formation in this game. The two most common ones are the close formation and the loose formation. Now, whether the formation is close or loose, you can tell simply by looking at the unit. As you can tell, those horses are very close to each other. They are in a very close formation. Now, this icon right here says that this is a two-sided token, which you can flip, and then you will have a loose formation. So this is a loose formation indicated by this icon and by how the unit actually looks. And this is a closed formation, also indicated by the icon and the unit itself. So now we can move on to the setup. Like I said, there are 3 modes of play here. The first mode is a single scenario mode, which is where you pick a scenario and so you simply play through it. You set up how the scenario says and you finish when the scenario says you are finished. And then you obviously check who won and who lost. Then there's the campaign mode, which is like a full-on campaign where you play through 9 scenarios that make up a whole big story. We'll go over that in a different video that you can find a link to in the description below. The third mode is a create your own scenario type of game where you have the scenario creator in the rulebook. I will not be going over this one. Once you've seen how to play through a single scenario and how to play through a campaign, the basic rules on creating your own scenario will be very simple to you, so I will leave those for you to discover. I will be setting up for a 2-player game in this tutorial video, so like I said, this is a video for a single scenario, so let me show you how to set up a single scenario game. So obviously when playing a single scenario, you have to start with picking a scenario. Then you choose sides. You decide which player is going to be playing the German Empire and which side is going to be playing Switzerland. Now, when you do that, you construct your battlefield using those big tiles. Each tile has a letter on it that will help you construct it. And I don't have a scenario printed out right now, but we're going to be going with a scenario called Ongoing Battle. This is a very basic scenario, and this is the scenario suggested by the rulebook to begin your playing Blood and Dust with. Because it allows you to just ease into the game and basically learn the flow of the game and the basic rules. Now, I don't have it printed out, but I do have it on my phone. And this is what it's going to be. This is what it's going to look like. Right here, you're going to have your starting forces. The text is in Polish, so if you can't see it, don't worry about it. It basically says your starting units, right? So, for example, it says that the German Empire begins with 1 light infantry, 2 heavy infantry, 1 unit of bowmen, and 1 hero Walter. So, and this also, right here on the bottom, shows you what the battlefield has to look like. So, as you can see, I did exactly that. Now you have to deploy your regiments. Now you're going to be taking turns with each player deploying a single regiment and then just taking turns until both of you deployed all your units. Now this page also shows you where you're going to be deploying your units. This red area right here is where Switzerland has to deploy their units, and this blue area right here is for Germany. So this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to, for example, let's say Germany goes first. So I'm just going to pick 1 unit and I'm going to place it, well, anywhere on the map, whatever way I like, but I have to keep to the blue zone. So for example, I'm going to place it right here. Now before I do that, I also want to show you one more thing. This icon right here. Because this shows the loose formation, but this icon means that I can flip this token. So on the other side, what you can see is a close formation. Now this is important when deploying your regiment, and you can see that this particular regiment has 2 sides, close and loose. You can choose which formation you want to begin with. So let's say I want to start with close formation, sorry. So this is how I'm gonna deploy it. Then it's Switzerland's turn, and they also choose a regiment to deploy it, and they're gonna place it, for example, right here. And you go on like this back and forth until you've deployed all your units. You do the exact same thing with your heroes, but you deploy your heroes after you've deployed all your regiments. In this case, in this scenario, we only have 1 hero, and it is on Germany's side. We have Walter, so we can, for example, deploy him right here. Every hero in this game has a specific card assigned specifically to him. Now, in this particular scenario, Switzerland has no heroes in play, so both their cards go back into the box. In case of Germany, one hero is actually in play, that is Walter, so we keep his card, but we remove the rest and return it to the box. Now this card stays in front of the player face up, so the player can remember about that particular hero's ability. Now what we do is we build the order deck. What happens here is we have two types of order cards. The basic ones, in Polish they have a letter P in the right hand corner, in the right upper right corner, sorry. And the special cards, the more advanced cards, that have the letter Z in Polish version of the game, obviously, in the upper right corner. Now a scenario will tell you whether any advanced cards are actually in play during this scenario. Now in case of this basic first scenario that I'm setting up for you here, there are no advanced cards in play, so we're only going to build our deck with these basic cards. Now each card has two halves, as you can see, the upper half and the bottom half. The upper half is an action that you can that you can resolve by playing this card. The bottom half is a reaction that you can play if the conditions that are here in the text are met. You can play it from the hand whenever it's possible for you to play them and whenever you want to play that particular card. Now here's something interesting. You take all the cards that you are supposed to have for this scenario, both basic and advanced, and you go through all of them and you hand pick your first hand of 5 cards. This is your starting hand. You picked those cards specifically. All the other cards you shuffle and you form an order deck. You keep the turn track nearby and you place the turn marker on spot number 1. Now most scenarios will tell you how many turns it will take to play through the scenario, and this is what you use to obviously keep track of it. And finally you create a supply of the various tokens you have in this game. I'm talking about stuff like the ducats, which is your money in this game. You have 3 different values. You have the 10s, you have 5s, and you have 1s. You also have your activation tokens, your counterattack tokens, your scenario tokens, your experience tokens right here, your engagement tokens right here, your damage tokens, and you have your dice. Now those are not the dice that are gonna be in this game. I borrowed those dice from other game. I'm using those ones for Switzerland and those ones for Germany. Obviously those are prototype versions, so try not to pay attention to what they look like. And I will also explain to you when the time comes how to use those particular tokens. Okay, so now that we've set up the scenario, let's start playing. Now the whole game is playing through a scenario is divided into rounds. Now each round is each turn is then separated into 2 phases: the action phase and the cleanup phase. The action phase is where each player activates their units and they perform actions with them. And once they've activated all of their units, then it's the cleanup phase where you perform basic cleanup operations. So now, how does the action phase work? The action phase works in this way. It is your turn. You pick one of your units, you activate it, you perform one of the possible actions you can perform with this unit. Once you've done that, you place an activation marker on it, and then it's the next player's turn. Then that player picks a unit, a single unit, performs an action, places an activation marker, and the turn returns. And the play goes so back and forth like this until each player activated all of their units. Now I've told you about the activation marker because it is important. Obviously, once you're done with a unit, you cannot perform any more actions with it. So when it is your turn again and you're choosing a unit, you obviously cannot choose a unit with an activation marker on it. Now the reason why I'm stressing that is because there are things in this game, certain things will happen during the game that will cause an activation marker to be put on that unit even though that particular unit hasn't performed any actions. So this is why I'm telling you this. When you're picking a unit, remember it cannot have an activation marker on it. Now what actions do you have to choose from? Well, you have the 3 basic actions, which is the move action, the salvo attack, which is the long range attack, the melee attack, which is a close range attack, and then there are actions you can perform from your cards, from your order cards, from your hand, And then there are some special actions that you may do or may be forced to do if you want to do something else later on. You will see about that during the video. Now, let's see, also, I almost forgot, when you're performing an action, there are also some reactions that your opponent may perform, also mostly from those order cards that you have in your hand. So now let's go over those three basic actions, which is the move action, the salvo action, and the salvo attack, and the melee attack. When performing a move action, the first thing you have to take a look at, the very important thing, is direction. When you look at those units like cavalry or infantry, the only way you can move is the front, which means you can only move that way. Now this is one of those games when you can move diagonally. So when I mean that way, the way that is facing the front of the unit, which means that this unit can move here, here, or here. It cannot move this way. Sorry. You can only move to the front. Now after you've done that, now that you know that, you take a look at the movement points right here in this arrow in the front of the unit. Now this says 4, which means that this unit has 4 movement points to be spent during a single move action. So this unit can move by 4, and since he can move diagonally, he can even go like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and he's off the screen. Now obviously it is possible that during your move action you might want to change direction. So it is possible in this game to turn while performing the move action. Now you can turn any way you want. You can turn to the right, to the left, or turn it 180 degrees and face the other side. Now a single turn costs you 1 movement point. It is also possible to change formation when performing the move action. For example, here we have a close formation, but let's say for some reason I want to change it into a loose formation. Now I can't do that with this particular regiment, so I decide to use one of those 2 movement points to change into a loose formation. It's also important to note that different terrain types might have various effects on your movement options. For example, this plain terrain right here has no effect on your movement. You can move by sticking to the regular movement rules. But this, for example, is a river. Now, river is impossible to move through or onto by any type of unit. This, for example, is a ford, which can appear on a map, and only a regiment unit in loose formation can walk onto it. But it's not the only thing that it does, because it also cuts your movement points in half, rounding down. Now a forest is another type of terrain that cuts your movement points in half, rounding down, and that can also be entered by a unit in a by a regiment in a loose formation. But it also does some other things. If you're in a forest, like so, it raises your salvo defense by 1. This is your salvo defense. Salvo is a type of attack that is like a long range attack. We will get to those in a second. So it raises the salvo defense by 1, which makes sense, right? You're hidden in the woods. But a forest also blocks line of sight. A line of sight is something that will come into play when we'll be talking about salvo attacks, for example. Now I'm sorry I can't show you a swamp type terrain because I don't have that particular tile in this prototype, but I can show you this in this rulebook right here that I have printed out. A swamp also reduces your movement points, but it doesn't cut them in half and reduces them all the way to 1, regardless of how many movement points your unit actually had. Now this is impossible to be penetrated or to be moved through by a machine. Only a unit like a hero or a regiment can move through swamp. This is a building. Now a building also cuts your movement points in half for all units. It cannot be entered by a cavalry unit or by a machine unit. It also blocks line of sight, but it raises your defenses. It adds 2 for a salvo defense, and it adds 1 point for a melee defense, melee, which is obviously close range attack. Now it is important that moving into the building or attacking a unit in the building is only possible through the side which has the arrow on it, because this is, as you probably guessed by now, this is the entrance. This is a hill. Now, a hill is an interesting type of terrain because it may have other types of terrain on it. For example, a building. And also it's important that any unit that is present that is standing on the hill does not have its line of sight blocked by any other units in the rest of the area. Now, the final type of terrain I wanted to show you is barricades. Certain scenarios might ask you to place a barricade token on your terrain. Now, a barricade token does one thing. It protects the unit that occupies the same space as the barricade. First of all, it makes it impossible to charge a unit on a barricade. Second of all, it raises their defenses. It raises the salvo defense by 2, and it raises the melee defense by 1. Now, heroes can move either independently as a unit, or they can be attached to a regiment and move together. Now, when they're attached to a regiment like so, they follow the same movement rules as that particular regiment. When they work independently, however, they can move any side they want. They don't have to turn, they can simply go side to side, upwards or downwards, whichever way they like. The way you attach your hero to a unit is you simply move onto a space occupied by that unit, or you move that unit onto the space occupied by that hero. Now, before I move on to this next thing, which is moving through units, I want to remind you that after you're done activating a unit and performing, for example, the move action, you have to place an activation marker on that unit to remember that this unit cannot be activated during this turn. An interesting aspect with performing the move action is moving through other units. Now, it is possible in some cases. First of all, a unit can never move through a space occupied by an enemy unit. So if in this case we have a German unit and they want to move here, they cannot because there is a Swiss unit standing in their way. But what happens when we have two friendly units? First, let's talk about a case where we have two units of the same type. So in this case we have two cavalry units, one wants to move through the other. The first thing that happens is both units switch to a loose formation, unless one of them already was at a loose formation, and then the unit that was passed through receives an activation token. Let's say there was a different type. Let's say this was not a cavalry unit. Let's say this was a light infantry unit, and this cavalry moved through them. That means that both of them switched to a loose formation, but this unit that was passed through not only gets an activation token, they also get a single damage token. And remember two things. First of all, changing formation always costs 1 movement point. Second of all, you can never finish your move on a space occupied by another unit. Whether it is a friendly unit or an enemy unit, it doesn't matter. You cannot finish your move here. You can move through them if they are a friendly unit. That's all. So now we move on to the attack action, which we begin with by discussing a melee action, which is the close range attack, the melee attack, I'm sorry. Now, the first thing you can do is you can move towards the unit you want to attack. But that unit has to be within your range of movement, which means if you use up your movement points, you have to be on a space next to the space occupied by the enemy unit you want to attack. So in this case, we exactly have this situation. For example, here we have 2 movement points, we move a single space, and now we are close to each other, so we're gonna fight. The first thing you do is you place an engagement marker on the border between those two units, because it is quite possible that you will not end this fight in a single turn. Now what happens is the attacker collects the attack dice. The number of dice is specified here by those little squares. So as I can see, this light infantry has 4 attack dice, which I'm collecting. If you have like a damage token or a wound token on your unit, then each token reduces the number of your dice by 1. So if the situation was like this and this unit had had 1 wound here, then the number of dice would not be 4, the number of dice would be 3. But let's say they have all their dice, they're not wounded, they're not damaged. So what happens now is they roll for attack. Now I have to take a look at the attack value right here. This is the melee attack value. Now it says 2. Now every dice that rolled a result equal or lower than this number is considered a hit. So here I have 2, here I have 1, those 2 are hits, but the 5 and the 6, those are misses. So I remove them completely, and those 2 are considered hits. Now, the defender gets to roll for defense. Now he rolls the number of dice equal to the number of hits by the attacker. So the attacker has 2 hits right now, so the defender takes 2 dice and he rolls them. Now what he does is he takes a look at the defense value on the side which was basically attacked. He was attacked on the front, not from the side, not from the back. He was attacked from the front. So here he has a defense value of 2. So every die that rolled a number equal or lower than this value dodges 1 hit. So here we have a 6, so this one didn't work, but this one rolled a 2, which means that one of those 2 hits was dodged. But unfortunately, that one went through. So what happens now is the defender gets a chance to counterattack. What he does is he does the exact same thing that the attacker did when attacking. So first he collects his dice, which is 4, and no wound tokens on him, so nothing reduces the number of dice. He rolls for defense, not for defense, for counterattack. Now we have 1, 2, and 2 6s, and his melee attack value is also 2, which means that now we have only those 2 hits. So now it's this guy's turn to try and defend himself. He's defending himself against 2 hits, which means he takes 2 dice, rolls them, and sorry for that. His defense value on the front is 1. Unfortunately, he was unable to defend himself against either of those 2 hits because he rolled a 2 and a 5. So because he has to roll, let me remind you, a value equal to or lower than this defense value. So unfortunately, both those hits went through. And now we assign damage. So this unit gets 1 damage and this unit gets 2 damage. Now if the value of damage is equal or greater than the number of attack dice that they have right here, then that unit is considered destroyed and is removed from the board. Now as you can see, we did not destroy either of those units, so they stay in play. They're gonna be fighting another round, so we keep this engagement token in play. We also place a counterattack token on the unit that performed counterattack. Because this is important, you can only perform a single counterattack during your turn, which means that if during the same turn any other unit decided to attack that unit, this one would no longer have the ability to counterattack, only to defend. Now it is possible that a unit would be destroyed in a fight, which means that this unit would get, for example, let's say that was the case, that Swiss unit was destroyed, and now this German unit has the ability to advance, which means to move onto the spot that was occupied by that unit, which just lost and was destroyed. Now if either of the units suffered at least 2 more damage than the other unit, then that unit is forced to change its formation to loose formation. But if it already had, or it already was in a loose formation, that would mean that it would have to flee and have a panic token placed on top of it. Any unit that flees has to flee a single space directly away from the regiment that it was just in combat with. Now, if such space, for example, cannot be entered because, for example, there's a certain terrain type or there's another enemy unit there, the unit can flee to another adjacent spot. Now if that is impossible, there is simply nowhere to go, that unit is removed from the game. Now what is important here is that once a panic token is placed on a unit, that unit cannot perform any action other than rallying. Now in order to perform a rallying action, you have to play a specific order card from your hand. Also what happens is that the melee defense value for that unit on all sides is always going to be equal 1. The number of attack dice and salvo defense, however, do not change. Now I just told you about fleeing, which means that in this particular case, this engagement would be broken. Now the attacking unit may choose, or the unit that is staying in the spot, the attacking unit may choose to pursue the fleeing unit and therefore not breaking the engagement. But they may choose to, for example, hold their ground, therefore the engagement is broken and the combat is over. So like I told you, if the defender gets 2 more damage than the attacker, they have to move into a loose formation. If they already were at loose formation, they have to panic and flee. But I was talking about a case where 2 units attack head on, so they both attack on the front, let's say. But if that unit was, for example, attacked either on the flank or on the rear, then they don't have to get 2 more damage than the attacker in order to disperse and move into a loose formation and so on and so on. All they have to do is simply get more damage. So even if this one gets 1 damage and this one gets none, this one still has to move into a loose formation. If it already was a loose formation, this one has to panic and move and start fleeing. Now let's talk a little bit more about engagement. As long as there is an engagement marker between 2 units, either of those 2 units cannot perform any other action than 3 actions. One is obviously an attack action, they simply can continue fighting. The second one is a turn action, they can turn, but then they'll stay engaged, but now, for example, different melee defense will be considered. Another possible option is to retreat. You always retreat, just like the fleeing I told you about. You retreat 1 space away from the other unit. Also what happens is that the unit that decided to retreat receives a single damage upon retreating, obviously. Now a very cool type of a melee attack is a so-called charge action. A charge action can only be a charge attack, sorry. Though this type of attack can only be performed if a unit has this icon, which means the charge ability, visible on its upper side, on the side that is facing up. Now, the way it happens is there has to be a single free plain terrain type between the 2 units. So if this unit wants to charge attack this unit, this has to be a single plain terrain type like it is right here. So what it does is it charges, so it basically just moves towards that unit and then simply follow the regular attack rules. For example, placing an engagement token. But the funny thing here is that now the number of attack dice is doubled, which means they no longer have 4 dice, they have 8 attack dice to roll. Now let's talk about the salvo attack, which is the long range attack. Here we have 2 units facing each other, a Swiss crossbow unit and a German crossbow unit. Now let's say this is the Swiss player's turn and he decides to perform the salvo attack action. The first thing he has to see if he has his enemy in his line of sight. See if there is anything blocking the line of sight. The way you do that is you try to construct a straight line from the middle of the attacker to the middle of the defender. As you can see, in this case, there is nothing blocking the line of sight. For example, there is no building between them. Now we check range. Now the salvo attack range is given right here. Here we have number 4, which means that any unit within 4 spaces from us is within our range. This unit is within 1, 2, 3 spaces. So he is within range, we can attack him. But is he within close range or short or long range? Close range is whenever we take that number, divide it by 2, and he's still within that range. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. So if he was, for example, here, he would be within close range. Now, since he is here, 3 spaces away, this is clearly a long range attack. And a long range salvo attack, unfortunately, reduces the number of attack dice in half. So normally, we still look at the squares, just like with the melee attack. We would take 4 attack dice, but like I said, this is a long range salvo attack, so we only keep 2. Now the rest of it goes pretty much similarly to the melee attack, because we roll the attack dice and now we check for any results that are either equal to or lower than the salvo attack value on our unit. In this case, both of those are, which means both of those are considered hits. Now what he does is he rolls for defense. Now his salvo defense is here in the bottom right corner. Just like in the case of a melee attack, he gets dice in the number of hits going through from the attacker. Since the attacker got 2 proper hits, he gets 2 dice to roll for defense. He rolls them, and he also has to roll a number equal to or lower than his salvo defense value. In this case, he only rolled 1, which means he got rid of 1 hit. But this 1 hit unfortunately went through, which means we assign 1 damage to that unit. If we were able to assign him at least 2 wounds or 2 damage, we would force him into a loose formation. If he already was at loose formation, which is the case here, he would panic, which would mean placing a panic token, and you already saw how a panic token affects that player. Now it is technically possible to target an engaged unit. In this case, you would have to spread the damage, or more importantly the dice, as equally as possible between the 2 engaged units. Now when setting up the game, I told you about an icon that you can find on a token, this bomb icon. This means that this is a firearm unit which uses firearms when performing the salvo action. Now what this does, it doesn't really affect the action, but it can cause some additional damage to the defender, because whenever the defender rolls for defense and he rolls a 6, he immediately has to switch to a loose formation. Now if he already was at loose formation, as you can imagine, as you probably guessed by now, panic token, and he has to flee. So maybe I used the wrong phrase, like it doesn't do any extra damage, but it does cause some extra stress, some extra pressure for the other player. Important thing to remember here is that any unit that has the firearm salvo attack ability also has this blue dot, which symbolizes that that unit is loaded. Those firearms, more importantly, are loaded. On the other side, it has the blue X, which means that it has to reload. So whenever you perform a firearm action, you have to turn the token onto the side with the blue X to suggest that it is now empty. Now, what if he wants to fire again, he has to first perform a reload action, which is a whole new action, right? So he has to wait one full turn and then another turn until he can be activated again. So a reload action is basically like any other action. Now we talked a bit about formation at the beginning. Now as you can see, there are those are the 2 basic types of formation, the close formation and the loose formation. Now we have other types as well. Now here in this prototype I only got the 2 other ones, the square formation. The square formation basically means that whenever a unit is attacked from either of the flanks or from the rear, it still has to suffer 2 more damage than the attacker in order to be forced to switch to loose formation instead of 1. Because usually what happens is if the attacker is attacking from the front and then the defender suffers 2 more damage than the attacker, then they switch to loose formation. Now remember, when they were attacked from one of the flanks or from the rear, then they didn't have to suffer 2 more damage to be forced into a loose formation, unless they were in square formation to begin with. then the regular rules apply. 2 more damage in order to be forced into a loose formation. Now here's an interesting one. This is a phalanx formation. Now if a regiment is in the phalanx formation and it is attacked from its front by a cavalry unit, then its number of attack dice rolled when performing a counter-attack is quadrupled. Now what is also important to remember is that this unit in a phalanx formation cannot be charged by any cavalry. Any attack from a cavalry is resolved as a regular attack. Now there are other types of formations that unfortunately I do not have on any of the tokens present in this prototype, but you can see them right here in this rulebook. Now this is a Children, which works pretty much the same as the phalanx formation that I just told you about. Now any unit in the Children formation is considered to have a front on all 4 sides of the token. Now this is also important because such a unit does not have to perform turn in order to switch directions. Now here we have a archer defensive formation, which is basically for your archers if they have that formation ability. Whenever that unit is attacked from the front or from the flanks, the melee attack value of the attacker is considered to be 1 and only 1, regardless of his actual melee attack value. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. And this scenario tells you when the game finishes, and then you check who the winner is. So that's how you play through a single scenario. I don't know if this is the first video you're watching. This is the first video I'm shooting of the 2, because I think that it's easier to get into the game when playing first through a single scenario. I know the core concept of the game is to play through the campaign, but like I said, this is the best way to get the flow of the game and to see how the actions work. So I hope you're watching this as the first video, but now I want to talk to you about the campaign mode, and that you can find in the second video, the link to which you can find in the description below. So that's it for this video. Let me remind you, the Kickstarter campaign launches or has launched on June 13th. The link is in the description below, if the campaign has already launched, that is, and that's where you can find all the details. Let's move over to the second video, and if you're done with me, you don't want to watch any more videos with me, then well, thanks for watching anyway, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!